new season.
You're listening to Arkansas Preps Weekly on Natural State Sports, your top source for the biggest news in high school sports across Arkansas.
And here we go.
What is up, everybody? Thanks for joining us on episode 49 of Arkansas Preps Weekly here on the Natural State Sports Network. My name's Kyle Sutherland, and we've got another special edition of the Arkansas Preps Weekly podcast this week, as we are right on the verge of the 2025 softball season, as well as baseball season, as we're close to spring sports. But last week we talked with Extra Innings Katie Lively and Jesse Warren, two former players. Of course, actually Jesse still plays softball, but two former collegiate players that talked a little bit about their career, as well as some of the new things that are going on at Extra Innings softball. There's been a lot of changes really in the last year or two. And in order to discuss that a little bit further, we're going to bring on the CEO of the company, CEO and sole owner of the company, Bonnie Holland, for a great conversation, just to dig into a little bit more of what the changes to the company have been since she took over, particularly the ranking system. I know that rankings, regardless of its team or player, it's always something that's a polarizing subject. So we're going to get a little bit more enlightened as far as what all goes into that and some of the changes that they have made, particularly for the younger classes in 7th and 8th grade. So got about a 40-minute conversation that we talk with her about a lot of really great things that I think that you can get a lot of regardless of the sport that you play. But without further ado, we will get into the conversation with Extra Innings Softball CEO Bonnie Holland. We're now joined by Extra Innings Softball CEO Bonnie Holland. And Bonnie, it is an honor to have you on here. We had a great conversation with Jesse and Katie last week that touched on a little bit of what you and I are going to talk in regards to just some of the way Extra Innings Softball has changed with your coverage, with the way that you do the rankings for the players. And it's really just a lot of questions, a lot of reasonable questions that people have that we're going to try to get some answers to. But first and foremost, again, welcome. It's great to have you. And I'll give you the floor a little bit, kind of like we did with Katie and Jesse, to give a little bit of your background.
Thank you, Kyle, for having me. I greatly appreciated it. So a lot of people might not know, they're just new to Extra Innings Softball, but we also have people that have been around for a long time that, like you mentioned before, have had a love-hate relationship when it comes to the big old rankings word. And so I actually took over full ownership of the company a year ago, January 16th. And since then, we've actually had 10 million impressions to our site and visits. And in the last 3 weeks, we had 2.4 million, which is the highest spike we've ever had in such a short amount of time. So we are growing. We're moving forward in the right direction. And we're really excited with some new initiatives that are proving to be successful. So we're really excited in that regard. And when I stepped into my new role, I had been a co-owner of the company previously, but I wasn't overseeing rankings at all. That wasn't my area. But since the company started, I was always in the background weighing in and giving my opinion on it. And then over the years, I had the opportunity to come on, be an employee of the company, and maneuver my way up to my current role. So I am thankful for it. When I stepped into this role, having overseen customer service for so many years and fielding complaints from people, how are rankings done? Or why are there so many kids tied? Or why was this kid above this kid? I understood firsthand how complex it was and how we needed to be able to give parents and coaches a concrete answer back of why someone was ranked over somebody else. I also heard lots of claims of bias in the rankings because everyone knew who to go to if they were upset about the rankings. And that was a really difficult sticking point for me and the previous co-owner of the company. So I knew I had a lot to do with turning the tide, winning back some credibility from some people in this space. But I want to say it was always meant to highlight the kids. The intention was always very good and pure in that regard, to bring honor to the kids. Let this be their moment to shine. You know, a lot of these kids might not go on to play in college, just, a select few do. But for those that are in high school, and that's kind of the end of their career after that age range, it's a way to honor them and to have that little bit of that bragging right that they have. Hey, mommy was ranked number 20th in the state or the nation. That's really fun for these kids to have. So it was always meant to be that, but there was a lot of problems that needed to be fixed and adjusted. So we went to work doing that. And I feel like we're in an excellent place now.
And I know that you, before you got into the role you are now, if I'm not mistaken, you've been around pretty much since Extra Innings started, but it was more so kind of behind the scenes. So talk about some things that you learned in that position and in the different positions that you've held within the company. And then also what really made you want to go from being behind the scenes to essentially running the entire operation.
Yeah. There's a lot there, right, to condense into a short answer. But so yes, I was behind the scenes weighing in throughout the years. And then I was asked to be and then I came on and started doing business development and oversaw the customer service center. And so I've done that for the last 4.5 years. 2 years in, I was asked to leave my job. I was working at the prosecutor's office here locally in Boise, Idaho. And I was asked to step into my role as a co-owner of the company, which I gladly accepted because I love the work that we do. I saw that there was a lot of kinks that we could work out with rankings and streamline it and make it better. So I came into that role. And then within a year, I had the opportunity to either be bought out or to stay and run the company myself. And so through a lot of prayer and pondering and just a lot of talking with people in this space, trying to get feedback, I decided I'd go ahead and keep it. And so here it is. It's mine now. And so it kind of led me to here. So I was definitely there the day it was established and I'm present for that and then heard the talk and watched it evolve over the years. But I also, because I ran that customer service side for so many years and was behind the scenes, I fielded a lot of complaints and about just the complexity of it. And it is a very difficult thing. How do you rank players fairly? That's a lot of information to gather and to sort through. And how do you do it? So it was a fair question. And I don't like not having answers for people. I don't like having things that are streamlined the way I would like them streamlined. And I feel like when you have parents and kids that are putting so much time and effort and money and funds and taking time off of work, we really need to be better at being able to answer for where we rank our kids because it really does impact them. And we don't want it to be a contention point for a lot of teams. And it became that over time. So I knew we needed to fix a lot of things in that regard. And we really set to work doing that. And there's always going to be room for improvement, but we've come a long way in just 1 year.
One of the things, and I want to go ahead and preface to our audience here, a lot of this conversation, of course, some of it is just things that I've come up with from my own personal experiences, but a good bit of this is actually going to stem from your podcast, Voices from the Field podcast, which I want to go ahead and promote that, and we'll do that at the end as well. But the episode title, I believe I think it's actually The Evolution of Rankings with Bonnie Holland. I don't know how I remember that off the top of my head. It's about a 45-minute episode with you and Katie that do a great job of breaking down just kind of how the rankings work, and we'll kind of revisit some of those. But the reason I bring that up is because throughout that conversation, I kept getting out that you really valued feedback, whether that was from the parents, whether that was from your team. Now, I think we've all, regardless of what job we've worked, like you, I've got a background in customer service, so I could write all kinds of books over that and some of the experiences that I've dealt with. But we've all had that boss that it's their way or the highway. They may say that they're going to listen to you, but it's one ear out the other. But feedback is something that I think we've really begun to realize in today's society, how important it is to value your people, to value opinions. So talk about that whenever you took over, how much you took that into account of listening to your people, but also the parent and coach feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. When you step into a situation, so it was difficult. I felt like a beast had been created with multiple ties. So when you're taking over a business, you've got to do some damage control where there was damage done. So for example, in the Elite 100 rankings, there's supposed to be 100 kids. In one of the most recent rankings before that transition happened, there was 568 kids ranked in the top 100 in one of those classes. Well, you can imagine if we're going to streamline that and say we're not doing ties anymore because of all the problems it creates, and it loses credibility over time. If you call something an Elite 100, stick to 100. And so people just started to see all these ties and this isn't credible and how are you doing this, and it's a money grab and all the things that they are saying. So imagine if you have 500 kids that were ranked last year and they were in the top 100. And little Sally that was ranked number 40th is now not even showing up in your Elite 100 next year. You're going to have a lot of upset parents, right? Like, how is it that my kid was this last year, now they're not this? And so we've had to teach and educate and explain to people. And now it's on our nomination form. They have to check a box that says, I understand that extra inning softball no longer conducts ties. In very rare situations would we do that if it's only for regional rankings, because every kid that's nominated will get a regional ranking so they know how they're lining up against their peers in the region. And only if there's been maybe an error on our side with a formatting issue or something, just very, very rare. But we're never going to touch the Elite 100. What it's published being is what it's going to be. I am not going to take phone calls from angry, upset parents or coaches that give me an earful and I go back to it and adjust that ranking by adding in ties, which is what happened over time. And so, but then you've got the claim of bias too. I got rid of that claim by appointing an anonymous rankings committee and developing ranking software to get around that. And so I hope that kind of speaks to that in that regard, with being able to, offset some of those challenges. It was difficult. So to your question, what do you do with all that, right? How do you go about fixing this problem? What do we do? So I wanted the feedback from the community, because a lot of times people harp at you and they get angry at you. And if I turn that question around and say, well, what would you do to solve this? They go, I don't know. I don't know what I would do. That's a hard one. And I like, exactly, you're right, it is. And so by bringing together some very big names in softball, I reached out to a lot of top names in the industry. And I said, come to a meeting. We're going to have a Zoom meeting. Let's jump on. Let's hash out some ideas. I also set aside a chunk of time, and for a few months was calling leaders of organizations saying, hey, I know there's some damage control we need to do here. Give me your feedback. And people want to be heard. And I would take notes and I would take it back to my team and say, okay, this is what I gathered. This is what they said. And they'd say, oh, that's a good point. But what about this? Let's troubleshoot that. Let's talk about that some more. Let's vet it. Let's do more research. So I talked with so many organizational leaders and head coaches throughout the United States. And I kept hearing a lot of the same complaints, a lot of the same concerns. And every time I would ask them, what would you do if you were in my situation? Here's what I'm looking at. They would give me tidbits of advice here and there. And so really just taking that back to the team and saying, okay, we like this, we like this, we like this makes sense. We did have some adjustments. We would play around with some of those things along the way. And if it didn't work, we would adjust for it. So we really wanted to hone in on this and make it something that was credible and reliable. And so we knew we needed that feedback from the community, because rankings, like we said, it's a big deal. And we wanted to be the go-to source for rankings. So feedback is everything, and we're still open to feedback, very much so.
Well, I will give you some feedback and say that I love that there are no more ties, because that is, it's not something I'm going to hate. It's not how I would do rankings. And so I'm very thankful that is not the case anymore, because like you said, it's when you've got a tie, it almost, I don't know. It's just Elite 100. It shouldn't be that. You said it was up to 500, right? So, I mean, you've got a tie for all.
One class. Yeah. And the top
right.
one.
And then we've seen that in polls with team rankings as well. I actually saw one for a college ranking recently, actually just the other day, that a preseason one that released. And so yes, I am one that is very thankful that is no longer the case. But I would imagine, though, kind of tying into that, having a committee now as opposed to just one person, because I tell people all the time how, yes, putting these all-state teams and these all-star teams at the end of seasons, like that's one of the toughest things, along with ranking both teams and players. Now, I've never actually ranked players before. I've done, top outfielders list, top third baseman and stuff with no particular order. But just like with what y'all do, it's a very polarizing topic anytime that you bring up rankings in any regard. So now that it's not just one person that decides all of that and you have a committee, I would imagine that makes it a lot easier, just because that one person be like, okay, I don't know where to go on this. I'm just going to give it a tie. Whereas one or two other people might say, well, here's what I think. And then you just kind of put all those together.
Yes, absolutely. And let me clarify too, those kids that were tied before, it was all positions lumped in together. Right. So how do you give third place to a catcher from Oregon with a pitcher from Florida? It doesn't even make sense. It didn't make sense to people. So we streamlined that. We did the Elite 100 pitchers, the Elite 100 catchers, infielders, and outfielders. And we just launched a few months ago our top hot hitters list. And so we're doing batting rankings now too. We also do the honor roll. And like I mentioned before, our regional rankings have been real success for us. So in that regard, we just, having an anonymous rankings committee, people can't say, oh, you're being biased. Well, coaches are biased. Parents are biased. No coach, no parent is going to be able to watch every kid in the United States, just like my staff can't do that either. But what I did is I brought on a team of women that have actually played, not, no offense, middle-aged men that never played the game. They can have covered sports for 30 years. That doesn't really matter to little kids and young women that are playing, and parents and coaches that have coached the game, that have been in it. This is a women's sport. So I need women who have been on the field, who have played at high levels, being the ones that are looking this over. And I brought on women that didn't even know each other to begin with. I have them all spread out throughout the United States. I have pro players. I have women that have coached D1. I have women that have played D1 before and have really made a name for themselves. Then they can review these rankings after we run it through our software system, and they rank them individually. And then we come together as a committee and we say, okay, let's discuss this. Why did you rank this kid number 6 and this kid was number 9? Let's go back and relook at this here, and let's do some fact checking, or let's make sure we're on the same page with this. It's more set of eyes. We also take up to a month to rank. Previously, individual that ranked for us 1 week, and he still does it. 1 week, everything's submitted. Think about it. You get 1,000 names, 1,500 names, 800 names, and in 1 week you can turn around and release rankings. That's part of the reason why they're glumped and there's so many ties, is there's no way you can do that in 1 week's time. And the way that was done is there was no algorithm. He would ask coach opinions and take the averages that were sent to him and base the rankings off of their opinions. It was also hiding the fact that there was no algorithm because there were so many ties, right? But now we've done that. We taught our software system where we wanted it to be. Well, what weight do you put on batting average versus, fielding percent? What weight do you put on a pitcher's ERA and whip? And, what do you do? And so we really went to bat, no pun intended on that, by going to a lot of college coaches and getting feedback on what do you think is more important? How much weight should we put on this versus this? And then we look at the tournaments they attend as well. So it's not just a stats-based ranking. What tournaments are they playing at? Are they playing up? Are they a good team sport? What are the coaches saying about them? We watch videos on them. So there's a lot of things we take into consideration now.
I'm glad that you pointed out the stats thing, because I think that's probably the biggest complaint that I usually hear of, this kid gets all-state or all-star, whatever it might be. Well, my kid had better stats, or this kid had better stats. Well, that doesn't always tell. It also doesn't always tell the full story, because who's scoring it. Let's be real. When you look at Game Changer,
Yes.
I mean, is it a fielder's choice, or is it actually a single? Like those types of things that have to come into play. Of course, I'm being kind of tongue in cheek on that, but for a lot of people, it is pretty much just stats. And if it were always team records or stats, then this job would be impossible for us, because there's a lot of teams that start undefeated, or kids that are batting 600 plus. So I want to go back to the software that you had talked about, a little bit about that, because it's not just a stat based deal. It's a database that essentially it narrows down nominations for you guys. I'll let y'all or let you go into that, because you know about it a lot more than me, but it essentially just helps you narrow down the kids.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Think about how much information is sent to you, right? We collect all the batting stats on every single player, and then we collect a whole handful of stats on infielders, outfielders, catchers, pitchers. What's their arm velo? What are their fielding percentages? All this information. So where do you begin? So the software sorts it for us. And then what it will do is it will red flag the ones that don't seem right. And we go in and say, wait a second, we've got a lot of red flags on this kid here. We need to go to work to verify this. So we reach out to coaches and reach out to parents, and we say, this is the time frame we want these stats for. We don't think it's really possible, based on what we're seeing here, to have that kind of a fielding percentage when this many games was played, or whatever the issue is. So we can clarify on that. And that kind of counters that claim of, it could be parents that are scoring. Unless Game Changer sent us all the stats, and unless Huddle scored every game for us, it's not going to be 100% perfect, right? It's just not going to be. But we are doing our best efforts to maybe be able to flag people that maybe aren't very honest with their stats. And we do the best that we can with the team that we have to verify. And then once those red flags are done, we update the stats and we gain some clarity with that. It does rank them in an order for us to begin. We've also taught the system to notify us and let us know how many tournaments are these kids going to? And it points out, national tournaments will be our golds, and some regional tournaments less than that. And so it pops up in our system. We can see, oh, wow, this kid played a lot of tournaments. Let's give some idea or some attention to that and gather some more ideas back from maybe coaches that we need to verify. Hey, tell us a little bit more about this tournament. We're not as familiar with it. If a kid's playing the turkey trot and they've got an amazing fielding percentage, it's going to be a lot different than if you're playing at nationals against the top at the top, right? And so let's educate ourselves more, because there's tournaments popping up everywhere. There's some popping up we've never even heard of before. We're like, wow, this one's new. And so that is definitely growing in that space. But of course, you've got the main, the PGF Nationals and Alliances out there. And there's a lot of fantastic showcases and tournaments they're out there. And so we do take in consideration as well where they're playing and who they're playing against.
And I like that what you said about the regions, because this is actually extremely relevant to, a smaller state like Arkansas. It's not just the national tournaments that, like, they might hold more weight, or they do hold more weight, but you do still pay attention to the regional tournaments as well.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That was very, very important for me, because I've had coaches reach out to me throughout the year saying, you know what, it really is hard for us because we have very talented players that are winning some of these top kids every single tournament or a lot of tournaments, but they can't afford to go to nationals. Right? The team maybe struggles and they can't completely afford to do that. And so they feel like they lose players sometimes because it is an expensive sport, especially when you're traveling in the summertime and all the housing and lodging and the entrance fees and having to buy their food there or whatever the rules are of the event. And so we do pay attention to those regional tournaments. It is a big deal. And I would like to see more regional tournaments happening in that regard too. But if we're doing a national ranking, there needs to be some national tournaments played though too. If we're going to say in the top 100 kids in the nation or young women in the nation, we need to see how you compare against the best of the best.
Absolutely. And I know that one of the other big changes was for 7th and 8th graders. Now, 8th graders halfway through the year, I guess the second semester, they can begin getting ranked at that time. But otherwise, for 7th and 8th graders, there's a watch list. And I know, like anything else, very polarizing when it happened. But another thing that, just feedback from a consumer like myself, I love that as well, because to me, I don't really start heavily promoting kids till they're at least in 9th grade, till about that high school level. Still want them to learn the fundamentals, have fun, and not be 13 years old worried about where they're ranked in the nation. But you also don't want to just throw it away completely. So that's just another thing that I imagine you probably got some feedback on, probably had some thoughts in your own head of, okay, well, how do we still continue to highlight these kids? And a watch list is a great way to do that.
We debated a lot on that, right? We had a lot of complaints we weren't doing it, but the vast majority of people say don't rank kids that young. It's a money grab. And I'll tell you right now, that was our biggest profit to the company, was doing the 7th and 8th grade rankings that young. It just was. We lost $70,000 this year by not doing it. We're a company. We still need to charge for our time so that we can give these services. But that was a big hit to the company. But I did not want to rank kids that young based on what the general consensus was. I haven't talked with anyone yet that said, oh, but you should do it. It was more like, oh, well, we like it when our kids in the top 100, but we know we probably shouldn't. But everyone else, coaches, organizational leaders, I've never talked to one that said you should rank them that young. And so when it first started, it was a big deal. But what happens with a little 7th grader when they're ranked number 50th in the nation or 20th? And next year, what if they're a few down from that? Just a few, right? it does take a mental toll on these kids. Give them some more playing time. Let them mature a little bit. Let them go to junior high, middle school, and have these experiences. Let them be a part of a team. So we're gearing more towards a team effort. We're going to be doing a team rankings for these 7th and 8th grade kids that we're launching in a few months. But the watch list was kind of like a happy medium. How can we still highlight them, let them have their moment to shine, get them excited, let them feel noticed, and to just kind of pump them up to continue doing good work. And so it's been very, very successful. We had a lot of great feedback. I went ahead and reopened the format back in so we can consider kids that are the watch list and add it to them. It is not a rankings. And I keep telling people, this is not a rankings. This is a highlight for these kids at this age. We're going to do some other fantastic initiatives that we have for the girls at this age. But the rankings will start when players are more than halfway through their 8th grade year.
I wanted to ask you too about the just talking about the feedback, because that was just really interesting to me. About, again, I as a business owner, but also someone that's worked for some not great bosses. That was just something that really stuck out when you're going through some things. Okay, this needs to be. I imagine when you first became the sole owner, there were definitely plenty of things that you looked at, like, okay, we need to look at revamping this. But as far as feedback, maybe from parents or coaches, is it one of those that maybe it's like, okay, well, this has been talked about 5 or 6 different times, we actually need to probably have a meeting about this? Or really, how does that all go about?
Well, one of the reasons why we split the company and the previous co-owner left was we didn't see eye to eye on this. He wanted to continue doing them, and I was fielding all the complaints in customer service. And I, as a parent, I have 4 children that I raised. I have a son that's had mental health issues, and I went through a hard time myself about 5 years ago. And you live long enough, you're gonna go through a hard time at some time in your life, And so I have a lot of empathy for that. I also, one of my degrees in school is in psychology, so I have a very clear understanding of the responsibility that we have as a company and as adults to not put too much pressure on these young kids. And so I really took that feedback and trusted it and thought, okay, this is a big leap of faith. If we're going to get rid of our number one money earner that keeps us afloat as a business, I'm going to go off of faith with this. I would rather send the message across. This is what I stand for. These are my values. Here's what we think is best for the kids at this age. Let's promote a team effort before they get too stuck in their own head about I am the best at everything. Let them come together as a team and have that playing experience first. And then as they get older and they want to be seen and they're thinking ahead to college and I want to be recruited and I want coaches at colleges to recognize me, there's an appropriate time for that. But 7th grade, starting your 8th grade year is just too young.
I think one of the most impressive things that came out of the interview with you and Katie, you had mentioned how, and I don't know if this is an exact number, but even if it's in the range, that's pretty phenomenal. 90% or complaints have decreased 90%, really ever since you guys have changed. I guess maybe in the last year or time. I mean, pretty recent time. That's pretty phenomenal, that high. So clearly what you and your team have come up with is working.
Yes, it's absolutely working. And I would dare say it's even been higher than 90%. Most of the people that reach out to us through and anyone can reach out if they have questions, rankings@extrainningssoftball.com. The rankings committee takes turns overseeing that email so that they can ask questions. If someone's like, why was this kid ranked here over here? We'll give feedback. Or if they say, what does my kid need to do to get a better ranking? We will give them feedback on that. But yes, our complaints have decreased because sometimes you get a little hothead parent or coach coming at us like, my kid, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, well, now we have information we can talk with, right? We've got it mapped out. We have our algorithms. We can say, well, actually, this player did this, this, and this, and this. You're telling us that our entire committee of women that are played at high levels, plus our ranking software is wrong based on your opinion when you haven't evaluated the child like we have or the player. And it kind of just shuts them down because it's all education, right? It's all education and they're not seeing what we see. There's no way. And so there might be times where one kid is more deserving than another kid. We do the best with what we have. So we have to ask for a little bit of grace, but I can guarantee you, we're giving you better answers than you would have ever received in the past. I don't like not giving people answers or direction on how they can improve themselves. We're all trying to improve. So that was very, very important to me. And so now most of the people that reach out, they're just curious. Hey, could you help me know what I need to do here? When do rankings start? Or help me understand this process. And so it's just been more of a year of educating, but those complaints have declined significantly.
think I can relate to that because I started doing statewide softball coverage the spring of 22. So this is going to be my fourth year coming up. And I think that the hate mail, I guess you could call it, that has certainly significantly decreased as coaches and parents have continued to get to know me. So I think that too is just kind of becoming more familiar with the process. But before we get out of here, I definitely want to make sure we promote the website a little bit. So here's just kind of the layout of it now. As far as nominations and rankings, you can go to right here, the player nominations. That's where pretty much for anything for watch lists. I'll let you elaborate on that. But for watch list, if you want to nominate a player to actually be ranked from, I guess, 9th through 12th grade, that tab is where to go.
Yeah, so it's the 10U and 12Us for the nominations for the watch list, and then all the other players are in that tab. Right now we have the class of 2029 nominations open. So in that yellow banner at the very top of the screen there, it says nominate here. So it's a countdown. We have 3 more days to get in your nominations. I will say that the nominations questions are a little bit more thorough than what we used to ask. It takes about 10-15 minutes to nominate each player, but we ask people to be patient with that. Because if you want a better ranking, give us more information. Before, there was a lot of open-ended questions, and they weren't consistently asked across the board. They are now, which allows us to be able to streamline getting those answers and tallying it up better. But yes, and previously, we didn't have a place on the website where you could go exactly there to look for the rankings. We're building that now, but they can look for it in the search bar to find it in the watch list. They can go to the search bar, but we should have that up within the next 2 weeks where they can go exactly to that tab and click on it and see those results right away. But yeah, so, and then also just to speak real quickly, for people that do join and become members of Extra Innings Softball, right there in that extra tab at the top, you're going to find most of our elite premium content that is behind a paywall. And I just want to just say that the income we have into the company when people sign up to see these rankings behind a paywall, it's because we need to pay our staff. We need to stay afloat as a business to be able to pay for the hours and hours and hours of work that we put into these. We've also rebranded ourselves. So the image of the kids, the bios, it looks so much better. They can share it on social media. It's just a fun little brag thing for them. But we have the commit crew. These are girls that are going to go play D1 that are working with us. They're offering drills and tips and tricks and all their inside fun stuff to be able to help these younger girls that are coming up through the ranks with their softball journey. We have interviews that are behind a paywall with top leaders and organizations throughout the country and coaches and top players. We also implemented something, this is my favorite thing, it's the influencers, the Extra Inning influencers. And these are the kids that were ranked in the top 100. We've started a program, but we're going to elaborate more on it, where these kids get to have a voice of their own. So under the extra tab, if you click on influencers tab, these kids are the authors of their own story. They get to pick any topic that they love about in softball, and they get to write about it. They'll do a little video clip on it, and they're the author. They want to hear from each other. They don't want to hear from us old people that are weighing in on topics. Let's make the kids the stars. They've earned it. They've been recognized. And then we also have our ambassadors, which are young women that want to be spokesmen for Extra Innings Softball and want mentorship on how they can grow their social media and how they navigate through the recruiting process. So we have a lot of initiatives that are just for our members, because the other complaint with rankings was they wanted better content. So we've really been trying to deliver on that.
That's something that probably doesn't get talked about enough either, is the amount of time that goes into this. I don't really talk about it a whole lot. Even with people in my circle, I don't talk about it a ton, just because, I don't want it to seem like complaint. And I'm not saying that you're doing it by any means. I will
complain. It takes a lot of time.
Right. You're telling what it is, but I don't ever talk about it, because I don't want people to think like, oh, well, it's your job, type thing.
Yes.
But that's something that is not understood, is the amount of time. And we love it, because we're all here to promote these kids.
Yeah.
But we put a lot into it. Obviously, you guys on a national level, I've done national rankings, so I know just a little bit, national team rankings. So I know a little bit of what goes into that. So that's something that's not talked about enough. It's, it's either there's too much ads on the page and it's free, or there's a paywall. So you just, you can't have it all, I guess. But
yeah.
Well, Bonnie, it's been a great conversation. I do want to ask you, before we get out of here, I always try to, anytime I'm talking with a softball player or just someone with an athletic background, regardless if it's CEO or whatever the case may be. You have endured hard times just like these kids have. I know that you know what it's like from a customer service aspect. You know what it's like to be a single mother of multiple kids, graduating college later. I really recommend to read Bonnie's story. It's very inspiring with what she's overcome. And what is some advice that you would give to the younger crowd that's maybe going through this recruiting process, that maybe doesn't like their ranking or things like that, or just going through a hard time that young kids go throughout their high school process and during the recruiting process in softball?
I would say the more effort you put into learning and growing and understanding, the more questions you ask. And if you're humble and teachable, the more information you're going to glean. And as we get information and we educate ourselves, you feel better equipped to be able to make decisions in your life. A lot of people feel lost. They don't know where to go to ask questions. That's a hard feeling that breeds some depression, some frustration, feelings of being overwhelmed. And it's typically because they don't have the information that they feel. Where do I start? We have a whole area on our website dedicated to recruiting tips. We have interviews about it where you can hear from kids that have been recruited from all over the United States. But reach out to us, ask us questions about it. They're more than welcome to reach out to us. They can email us at customerservice@extrainningsoftball.com, or if it's rankings related, at rankings@extrainningsoftball.com. And a member of our team will help give you some direction on how you can get through that. We also have regular Q&As where you can jump on with our team of these young women that are committed to D1 Power 4 schools and ask them questions. Where did you start? What did you do? We had one a few nights ago where a sweet little girl jumped on and she said, "Can you tell me your opinion on the importance of prayer?" It was so sweet. She wanted to understand how can she keep her faith while she's playing and setting a good example, and is it appropriate? And so we had a whole discussion about that. It was fantastic. So I would just say reach out to us, ask any questions you want. We'd be more than happy to be a guiding light in that regard.
There was one more that I lied. So this is actually the last one. I did want to make sure that I did get this in, because this is also very important. I know for any state, but especially Arkansas. You're also talking about, or maybe you already are, watch list for the 25s and 26. So basically juniors and seniors, essentially. Now, is that something that is happening or something? I don't want to open up a can of worms.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah. That's still in the works. So right now, if you go to our website and you go to the polls tab there at the very top, we built in polls on some controversial topics that people can go to our website and weigh in and vote on. We're going to take the information we glean from that to help us be that guiding light to say, what's the audience telling us? What are the people telling us in this regard? So go there and take that poll. We've had pretty equal feedback. If you actually pull it up right now real quick, you can be able to see how many people are suggesting we do watch lists for those ages versus a ranking. So this is me wanting to do some market testing and get more information back from the community on what they want so we can deliver on that. But I didn't want to just make that decision so without first vetting it. And it's a big decision to make. And so, especially because we put so much time into the rankings. Now, we will do some types of watch lists. We're working closely with Max Preps. We're doing some co-branding with them right now. I also wanted, this is very important, we've shifted. We're not just doing 100% club. We are highlighting youth and high school as well. And so about a third of our content will be broken between each one of those. And we're working very closely with Max Preps on that, the feel-good stories, highlighting. We're talking about some initiatives we can bring, or we're collaborating and working together. They're behind us. They believe in our mission. They've been fantastic to work with. And so we really are just trying to be the most complete coverage out there. And I feel like we are.
Yep, no doubt, and appreciate what y'all do. And obviously, I know that probably, I don't know, do you hear y'all very often up in Boise? I got to ask you that.
Y'all, no, but I like it. I wish we did.
Yeah, it's sometimes when I talk to like national people, I forget sometimes they're not used to hearing that, in these, that we usually say in these parts. So, well, no, Bonnie, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Just to kind of shed some light on, it's still a new process for the most part. I guess you've been the owner for about exactly a year now. Of extra inning,
the sole owner for a year, but I was an owner for a year before that too.
Co-owner, So but as far as the new process, it's still, pretty much brand new for the most part. So really appreciate you shedding some light on that. I know, as I said at the top of the show, that there's a lot of reasonable questions being asked, and that's kind of the goal is here to unpack. But it's very clear that the mission here is to help the girls, and so that's just really what it all boils down to. So. Well, Bonnie, thank you so much again for the time. It was a very fun conversation. Hopefully, I know that I learned some things. Hopefully, some others did as well.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, that will do it for episode 49 of Arkansas Preps Weekly. Of course, we'll get into softball a little bit more as we get into February. Of course, next week we'll be back with some basketball talk. But other than that, make sure you're subscribed on YouTube as well as the audio platforms, Apple, iHeartRadio, Spotify. We are there. We will catch you next time.